I'm Kurt Munz, and this is joint work with Vicky Morwitz. Since the 1950s, decision scientists have believed that the behavior of choosing causes people to improve their attitudes towards the things they have chosen. Today, we're going to challenge the idea that choosing causes spreading. We're going to show that spreading of alternatives, a process long thought to result from choice, requires neither choice nor the self-perception of having made a choice to occur. Rather, spreading occurs whenever people accept outcomes. People normally accept the outcomes of their own choices, but they may also accept outcomes they have not personally chosen. For example, we didn't choose this hotel, the Psychonomic Society did, but did being assigned it change our attitudes toward it? Brehm classically demonstrated that choosing a product changes a consumer's attitude toward it by asking consumers to provide attitude ratings for several toasters. He then asked them to choose between two they had initially rated about equally. After the choice, he asked them to rate the toasters a second time. He found that attitude toward chosen toasters improved and attitudes toward rejected toasters declined. He explained this post-choice spreading of alternatives by cognitive dissonance. The negative features of the chosen toaster became inconsistent with the knowledge of having chosen it, and choosers were motivated to relieve the resulting unpleasant feeling of cognitive dissonance by adjusting their attitudes to become more consistent with their choice. One way that this attitude change could happen could be through adjusting the importance of the product features, either by bolstering the features on which the chosen toaster excelled or by trivializing the importance of the poorly performing features. So imagine that a consumer initially desired to buy a toaster with 3 bread slots. If the consumer ultimately chose to buy a toaster with 2 slots, that consumer may think to him or herself, having 3 bread slots wasn't actually all that important to me. By downgrading the importance of the missing bread slot, the consumer could be happier with the chosen toaster. So beginning with Brehm's work, researchers have agreed that the behavior of choosing caused the spreading of alternatives. However, in 2010, Chen and Risen published a critique of Brehm's paradigm. They argued that for causal evidence that choice affects attitudes, the outcome would need to be randomly assigned. So several researchers subsequently published papers doing so. These papers used a blind choice technique where they gave the participant the perception that they had made a choice, but actually randomly assigned the outcome. For example, Charot, Velasquez, and Dolan led participants to believe that they were making subliminal decisions. Options were flashed on screen too quickly to be read, but participants were asked to choose anyway. The outcomes were actually randomly assigned, and others have altered choices by sleight of hand and found similar results. Critically, in these studies, perception of choice was used to moderate the spreading effect. Only those who believed they had chosen changed their attitudes. Because spreading occurred without any actual choice, some of the authors concluded that spreading was more consistent with Behm's self-perception theory, where people infer their own preferences from the choices they have made. In contrast, we argue that neither choice nor the self-perception of having made a choice is required to observe spreading of alternatives. Rather, spreading depends on accepting an outcome. People normally accept the outcome of their own choices, but they can also accept outcomes without believing they chose them personally. To illustrate, I'll tell you a quick story. A colleague of mine is something of a foodie. She appreciates simple, fresh ingredients in her cooking. She told me about a product on sale in Europe called Siementhal. It's a canned meat product that comes packaged in beef jelly. It's the type of product that doesn't change shape when you remove it from the can and somehow won't expire for over a decade if properly stored. Given her food preferences, I was shocked to learn that she had surprisingly favorable attitudes toward it. When I probed, she disclosed that she had worked as a brand manager at Kraft Foods in Europe, and she had been assigned to manage the Siementhal brand. She hadn't chosen to manage Siementhal, but having accepted her assignment to manage the brand, her attitude toward it had improved. Today, I'm going to show you evidence for spreading of alternatives without a perception of choice from 3 studies. The first is like the marketing manager example. We told participants that they would have to sell a particular brand to one of their peers, and we observed improvements in their attitudes toward the assigned brand immediately after. Next, we'll look at our proposed mediator. When participants were assigned a hotel with certain features, we found that they rated poorly performing features as less important. They trivialized them. Finally, we'll bring it all together. When participants had a hotel chosen for them by their employer, their attitudes toward the assigned hotel improved, mediated by changes in the importance of the hotel features. This mediation was moderated by acceptance. The more participants reported that they accepted the outcome, the more pronounced the spreading in attitudes. The first study shows the main effect, that attitudes toward an outcome can spread even when there is no perception of personally choosing that outcome. And we show this in a salesperson scenario. 48 NYU students were included in an analysis for a longitudinal design that consisted of 2 sessions separated by 2 weeks. At time 1, participants provided their attitude toward retailer brands on 13-point scales. Based on their time 1 measurements, we randomly selected 2 brands that were rated equally and as close to neutral as possible. That means 2 of the brands there that are rated as 0 if possible. We randomly selected 1 brand as assigned and the other as competitor. At time 2, about 2 weeks later, we told participants that they would have to enter a chat room to try to convince another participant to buy their assigned brand. They would be competing against a third participant that would be selling the competitor brand. After assigning the brands, but before the chat room, we measured attitudes toward all of the same brands that we measured at time 1. And the chat room never actually occurred, so they never tried to convince anybody of anything. We observed the predicted interaction, so that means that attitudes toward assigned brands improved significantly, while attitudes toward the competitor brands remained unchanged. Consistent with spreading of alternatives. So there's no difference at time 1, and they spread apart such that there's a significant difference at time 2. So study 1 showed that attitude change for an assigned outcome. The purpose of study 2 was to show that assigned outcomes also affect our proposed mediator, feature importance. In the spreading literature, it was thought that negative features of a chosen outcome would be dissonant with the knowledge of having chosen it. Thus, we predicted that even when consumers would be assigned an outcome they accept, they would trivialize the importance of poorly performing features. That is, a particular feature wouldn't be as important after being assigned a hotel that performed poorly on that feature. So we modeled this study on Hotwire.com. Hotwire has a feature where consumers can pick the location and star classification of the hotel without knowing the actual hotel they are choosing. Thus, when they choose the hotel, they don't know how that hotel performs on various features. We use this setup to manipulate the performance of features our participants had not personally chosen. This was another longitudinal study, except this time on Amazon Mechanical Turk. After attention checks, 174 were included in the analysis, and again, time 2 occurred about 2 weeks after time 1. At time 1, we measured feature importance, first on independent 7-point scales and then on a 100-point bipolar trade-off measure, where participants were asked their relative importance between amenities and cleanliness. That should be service, between amenities and service. At time 2, participants were randomly assigned one of these hotels. We manipulated service and amenities and held cleanliness and location constant. So what you see on the left, on the assigned service condition, participants were assigned a hotel that was rated 4 out of 5 stars on service, but only 2 out of 5 stars on amenities. In the assigned amenities condition, it was the opposite. Participants were assigned a hotel rated 2 out of 5 stars on service and 4 out of 5 stars on amenities. So this was the 100-point bipolar trade-off measure, which I'll show you the results of now. So these are the results of the bipolar trade-off measure I just showed you. We found a pattern consistent with spreading feature importance. So there was no difference at time 1, but importance spread apart such that there was a significant difference at time 2, indicated by the significant two-way interaction. Participants in the assigned service condition moved the slider bar significantly closer to service at time 2 compared to time 1. And participants in the assigned amenities condition moved the slider bar closer to amenities, so the difference did not reach significance. So while this pattern is consistent with spreading, we also wanted to know how the importance of individual features changed. That is, did participants trivialize poorly performing features, or did they bolster the features that performed well? So to analyze that, we looked at the independent importance measures, which were on 7-point scales. Looking at the two features that we manipulated, we found that poorly performing features were trivialized. In the figures, the different colors of the bars indicate the different time points. Those in the assigned amenities condition on the left, who were assigned a hotel rated 2 out of 5 stars on service, significantly lowered their report of the importance of service. And those in the assigned service condition on the right, who were assigned a hotel rated 2 out of 5 stars on amenities, significantly lowered their report of importance of amenities. So we've shown that assigning outcomes can affect attitude and feature importance ratings. In study 3, we aim to show that in response to assigned outcomes, changes in attitude are mediated by changes in feature importance. We did this in the context where the self-perception of having made a choice is even lower when an employer books a hotel room on the employee's behalf. We also aim to demonstrate that acceptance of outcome moderates the effect. Specifically, spreading of alternatives should only occur for those who accept the outcome and should be stronger for those that are more accepting of the outcome. The study was nearly the same as study 2, except participants were told that they would have a 3-night business trip booked for them by their employer. We also measured attitudes, and the star ratings were replaced with stoplights based on those used in consumer reports, like you see on the screen. An alternate explanation for spreading in this study could be that the company chose the hotel because it's a good one, and our participants were responding to this new information. So to reduce the perception of an implied endorsement by the company, we included this language: no one in your company has stayed at this hotel or has any opinion about it. Like study 2, this was another longitudinal study on MTurk. After attention checks, 410 were included in the analysis, and time 2 was 2 weeks after time 1. This graph shows the results of that bipolar sliding scale, which we've seen before, which measures the relative importance of amenities to service. We replicated the pattern we observed in study 2. There was no difference at time 1, and they spread apart such that there was a significant difference at time 2. And the spreading was because participants in the assigned service condition moved that slider bar closer to service at time 2 compared to time 1, and participants in the assigned amenities condition moved the slider bar closer to amenities at time 2 compared to time 1. We also replicated the pattern of results when analyzing the independent measures of feature importance. As before, participants trivialized the poorly performing features. One major change for study 2 was that we also measured attitudes at both time points. We measured attitudes toward 2 hotels, the 2 that you see on screen. One performed well on amenities and the other on service. At time 2, we assigned one of these hotels to the participants based on condition. So in the next slide, I'll show you the change in relative attitude computed by subtracting the attitude toward the second hotel from the attitude toward the first. So positive numbers indicate a preference for the hotel that did better on amenities, and negative numbers favor the hotel that has better service. On our attitude measures, we replicated study 1 in that we observed spreading of alternatives for randomly assigned outcomes. There was no difference at time 1, but the attitudes spread apart such that there was a significant difference at time 2. Those assigned a hotel performing well on service adjusted their attitude to more strongly favor service, and those assigned a hotel performing well on amenities adjusted their attitude to favor amenities. When discussing post-choice spreading of alternatives, we described how choosing affects feature importance and subsequent attitudes. Today, we've argued that the same process can occur for assigned outcomes. We also suggested that this would be the case for outcomes people accept. So we tested these predictions in a moderated mediation model. Acceptance was a measured moderator. We measured acceptance by agreement on 7-point scales with 4 statements about the business trip scenario. I am accepting of where I will stay. I plan to stay in the hotel my company booked. I will accept the hotel my company booked for me regardless of my opinion about it. I will refuse to stay in the hotel my company booked. We found that higher levels of acceptance led to greater spreading of feature importance. And when we tested the whole model, we found significant moderated mediation in process. So the key findings: spreading of alternatives does not require self-perception of choice. Rather, spreading depends on accepting an outcome. Changes in feature importance mediate those changes in attitudes. This can extend the theory of post-choice spreading and help make predictions about when we can expect it to occur, and may have practical implications for companies that are doing the choosing on behalf of their customers. Thanks very much for your attention. At this point, there was a question at SJDM New Orleans that I'd like to try to answer. The question was about why it was trivialization and not bolstering the features that were important. So if you think back to the first slides, we discussed that dissonance should be aroused when things are inconsistent. So for each of these hotel features that we had in our study today, it was the case that people would want to perform well in all of them. So the only inconsistency would arise when when the hotel that was assigned performed poorly on it. So in that case, we would only expect dissonance to be aroused from the negative features. We wouldn't expect bolstering. In this case, we would expect trivialization. So I think that explains the pattern that we see in these studies, and it's consistent with the prior work. All right, thanks very much.